He's had twists, he's had turns, he's learned a whole bunch of stuff, and he wants to pass some of that on to us. He's a true entrepreneur to the heart, and has a lot of, I don't want to take anything away from his story because it's just great. So Blair is a BU alum. He'll tell you a little bit about that too. So it's just nice that he's here giving back a little bit, because when you hear his story, you'll know what a busy schedule might sound like. So anyway, let's welcome Blair McIntosh.
So I'm going to give you the executive summary of what my 30 years of experience has consisted of, and some of the highlights of all of that, and hopefully it will resonate with some of you folks, and you'll sort of be able to get something out of it, because really that's really my objective for being here tonight, to share these things with you. Is I'm hoping that I strike the chord with at least one person, and that they sort of see that the potential of taking whatever you learn here and all the passion that you currently have and doing something with it is doable. So I prepared a little bit of a speech here, but I'm going to just, like I said, give you the highlights tonight. First of all, I've been, it's been 35 years. I mean, 81 to 2015, it sounds like an eternity, but I feel like I've been reincarnated, and this is like my fourth life for some reason. But I wanted to do a show of hands here tonight, first of all, to see how many of you intend to start your own businesses and become an entrepreneur and really, put everything on the line and to do that. So we've got a few people here. Okay, so just out of curiosity, most of you are taking this entrepreneurship course not necessarily for purposes of starting a business, but just to kind of learn a little bit about what that entrepreneurial world is all about. Is that fair to say? Yeah. All right. So anyway, for those of you who do plan on starting your own businesses, I can tell you that if you do embark on that journey, whatever the outcome is, I promise you that it's going to change your life in more ways than you can imagine. That's certainly been the case for me. And I hope that my little story can have a positive and inspiring impact on some of you to maybe take that risk, So let me cut to the chase here. I grew up in a small town here in the Eastern Townships, a little town called Windsor Mills, not too far from here. Those were certainly the formative years, high school, elementary school. Grew up as an Anglophone in a predominantly Francophone community. Which was interesting in itself, to say the least, because as you recall, back in those days, the linguistic situation was very different than it is today. So I was sort of caught between the old world and the new world, as it were, and made the decision after high school to stay here in Quebec and learn how to speak French properly and do something with my life here in Quebec, as opposed to Ontario or British Columbia or somewhere else like most people that I graduated high school from did. In fact, I think 80 or 90% of the people that I went to school with left the province. And so I share that with you because in 1974, when I graduated high school, that was the year I had to make the decision on whether I was staying here or leaving. And I decided to stay here for a variety of reasons. I love this place. It gets the blood flowing in the morning like no other place on the planet, and the opportunity to live in two cultures is exciting in itself, and there's just so many opportunities here if you really take the time to look at it and explore them. So. In 70, like I mentioned earlier, I graduated here at Bishop's in 81 in geography, and those years here at Bishop's were, some of the finer years of my life. I'll never forget them. They don't seem that long ago, even though it was 1981. I graduated here then, in May or whatever it was that year, and my first job was the result of, and this is where the networking, which I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit as I go on here, but because networking is a very critical part of being an entrepreneur. And what I mean by networking is, establishing a circle of friends and family and business acquaintances and so on and so forth, people that you can turn to if you need help to get your business going. So I had noticed that my dad was taking a night course here at Bishop's in '81, and he met a gentleman who was the purchasing manager over at what is now known as Waterville TG, which is I think still the largest employer in the Eastern Townships. And he had mentioned to this gentleman that I was looking for a job. I was just fresh out of university and really didn't have a whole lot of experience other than summer work. I'd worked all over the country though, but in different jobs, the mining industry and the pulp and paper industry in the Northwest Territories and Ontario and places like that. But I didn't really have a lot of experience per se. And he said there was a job opening at that company. There were 100 employees working there at the time. It was owned by B.F. Goodrich in those days. And he managed to get me an interview with the gentleman who was running the industrial engineering department at this company. And I really didn't think I had a hope in hell of impressing him, because first of all, I didn't even know what industrial engineering was. I had done a little bit of research, obviously, before I showed up for the interview, but largely didn't know what it was. So I met with this gentleman and told him my story, and we clicked. And make a long story short, he took me under his wing and hired me as an industrial engineering analyst to work, under his leadership. And at that time, he had like 5 people working in the department. 3 of them were engineers, including himself, and a couple of technicians. And my job was to be a technician and do various industrial engineering tasks in this factory that made automotive weather stripping for cars. And anyway, I stayed there for almost 5 years. And during that 5-year period, the company grew from 100 to 1,200 people in 5 years. So you can imagine the upward mobility opportunities that existed as a result of this rapid growth. And so I obviously was one of those people that benefited from that growth. I learned the trade. I took every opportunity to really understand what industrial engineering was all about and how it applied to a manufacturing environment. And I basically learned the foundation of manufacturing by working in that role in that company. And I think as a result of those 4 years working in a manufacturing environment and understanding the principles of manufacturing and the principles of industrial engineering, I was able to acquire an appreciation for that, and I said to myself, I want to do something with this. And so what I did is, in the 5th year, for a variety of reasons, and I had established a fair amount of confidence by that point, I decided that I was going to leave the company, which was a bold move on my part because I had a great job. I think I forgot to mention that at the end of that 5-year period, I was in charge of the industrial engineering department, and I had 7 engineers working for me, and I was a geographer. So, it doesn't mean that in this world that we necessarily have to study in our own field to be able to learn something else or even work in that environment at a future point. But anyway, I had built up a fair amount of confidence and knowledge about manufacturing, industrial engineering, and to some extent marketing for some reason. And I basically left the company on my own accord and started this small consulting business where I was offering what I call no-nonsense marketing or no-nonsense industrial engineering consulting services to small and medium-sized companies here in the Eastern Townships. And I worked for probably 25 different companies, within a 50, 60-mile radius of here. And I was able to find all these jobs, these mandates, by working with acquaintances, once again, banks, accounting firms, and so on and so forth. And they were able to put me together with all these companies that needed help. And so I without tooting my horn too much, I was able to help most of these companies kind of overcome the obstacles that they had encountered. And, it seemed rather black and white or straightforward to me as to what the problem was and what the solution needed to be. But not only was I able to identify and tell them what it was, but my job, at least I felt that was my job, that's what made the difference between what I call no nonsense and, companies or consultants that basically, tell you all kinds of stuff, but, they leave and nothing gets done. So my job was really to actually implement the solution and, kind of put my money where my mouth was, so to speak. And so that's what I did, and I had a lot of fun doing that. I built up even more confidence and worked, one company was here in Sherbrooke. It's actually the oldest manufacturing company in Sherbrooke, still exists today. Turn of the century company where they manufacture plastic coated fabrics. And I had done a couple of consulting jobs there, and at the end of the second one, the president of the company asked me if I'd be willing to stay and take on the role of sales and marketing manager, because the mandate that I had done there was actually sales and some marketing as opposed to industrial engineering. And what I did for them was I came in there and the mandate was to try to figure out how to get more sales into the company because things were slipping. And one of the things I identified was a huge opportunity with the federal government. They were buying all this material, that kind of material that was manufactured in Sherbrooke from other companies in Canada. And what they would do with this stuff is they would make all kinds of military products like tents and shelters and so on, and tarps and so on and so forth. So there was this big bid that was online. In those days, the computers were just really taking off, and there was this bidding system that they had established, the federal government had established, where anybody could bid on an opportunity, and we bid on this opportunity, and it was mind-boggling because we won it, and it was like millions of dollars of product, which for this company was like the equivalent of like almost a year of business. So they were just like flabbergasted that we were able to pull this off, and now we had to deliver. And so at the end of that second consulting mandate, the president, who was not an owner of the company, but he was near retirement, asked me if I'd stay on, take on the role of sales and marketing manager now that I had kind of proven to him that I knew how to do the job. And not only that, but he said, you have an opportunity maybe to be the next president of the company because I'm going to be retiring in the next year or so, and I'll take you under my wing and show you what that's all about. So that all sounded dandy. So I put my consulting business aside and I took on that job on a full-time basis. Had a lot of fun with it, but in the back of my mind I was thinking I want to be the president of this company. And I wanted to fulfill what he said was possible. However, what I found out during the course of the year after that decision was that he had no intention of recommending me as his replacement, because as time grew, for some reason we didn't see eye to eye. The chemistry between him and I was not good, so he decided unilaterally, without telling me, that I wasn't going to be one of the candidates for the job. And I found out through the grapevine. And just to put things into perspective, the company was owned by two American families. They both owned 50% of the company. So nobody had the power to make a decision. The power really was vested in the president of the company, who had an axe to grind with me and some of the shareholders. And he held the power. And the only way to tip the balance of power was to convince one shareholder in one family to sell their shares to the other family. And so my brain went to work, and I figured there's got to be somebody out there. There was like 26 shareholders in this company, and they were all absentee shareholders. They were living down in different parts of the United States, and they really had no interest in the company other than to see it survive, and they were getting some dividends, when the company was making money and so on and so forth. And they thought maybe one day if it ever got sold, that's when they would reap the benefits. And so I identified one member in one family who was a bit of a sort of the black sheep in the family, if I can put it that way, and he decided that he was not happy with the way the company was being run, and he was not happy with the president of the company and some of the shareholders and the other family, and he agreed over a period of time to sell his shares to the other family. And of course this created total havoc with all the family members. And I'm looking back on that whole experience, and I was just thinking about how much turmoil was created as a result of that one guy making the decision to jump ship. But it got done, and how it got done was, I didn't do it on my own. I mean, I was the brains behind it, so to speak, but I didn't have the expertise to pull it off, so I had to go and find a lawyer, a good business lawyer in Montreal, who understood the necessary procedures to be able to pull off what was essentially a hostile takeover. And between him and I and a couple of members of the shareholders of the company, we were able to pull this off in about a 6-month period. And what it consisted of essentially was just having a shareholders meeting where there was a vote. And at that time, this guy sold his shares, and legally speaking, it all took place in the course of an hour. The only problem was that the family that disagreed with this, and the president of the company at the time, just said they're not playing ball, and they didn't want to cooperate, because what happened is the day after this shareholders meeting took place, I showed up at the door with a couple of members of the other family who took control of the business and said, okay, we're now taking over, I'm the new president of the company. And it was like, no, you're not. And they locked the door and shut me out, and they refused to cooperate. So we had to take this thing to court and get a judge to basically concur that everything was done appropriately, and that in fact this other family now held the power, and I was the new president of the company. So that took another week or two, and it got done. And make a long story short, they ousted the former president. I came in, and we started to make things happen, turn the company around, and so on and so forth. However, interestingly enough, over the course of the first year after this took place, the people I was working for, who were now running the show, they had the power, 51%. They started to do some crazy things, like buy inventory that the company didn't need, hire people, put people on the payroll that had no skills, family members and stuff like that. So what happened as a result of that kind of decision was that the company was, began to be, the financial resources of the company started to dry up. And they dried up to the point, as a result of all these bad decisions on their part, it resulted in the bank pulling the plug and calling the loans that the company had. And then they put the company in what is known as the Special Accounts Division in Montreal. It's the Bank of Montreal. And these guys that operate the Special Accounts Division, they're known as the undertakers, because once you get into that department, the word undertaker would suggest that you're probably not coming out alive. And 80% of the companies that go into the Special Accounts Division do not come out alive. They go bankrupt. 20% do survive. And this company was one of those 20% that did survive, and survived for a variety of reasons. Let me just back up a few steps, because prior to this all happening, I actually resigned as the president of the company, because I could see the writing on the wall, and I didn't want to be associated with the bank pulling the plug and the company going down the tube. So I basically resigned as the president, but I agreed to stay on as a consultant, as it were, somebody who managed all the sales of the company, because that's ultimately what I did at that company. I was running the company, I was the president and everything, but my biggest role was as the sales manager. And I had established all these relationships with all these big customers. So they agreed to that because they realized that if I left completely, that, you know, they'd be left in the cold and they wouldn't have anybody to really run the sales. So they agreed to that, and I went home and I started working in my basement. But while I was working in my basement, I was concocting another hostile takeover strategy to take out the guys that, you know, I ultimately had helped, who helped me to become the president. So it was kind of a weird situation, but I realized that I had no choice, because if I didn't do this, the company was going down the tubes. So I got a call from the bank, and they asked me to come in and talk to them about the sales and all that, and I established a relationship with the guy who was heading up the file, as it were, the undertaker at the Bank of Montreal. And I told him, I said, look, I said, you know, what's going to happen here? And he said, well, there's two choices. He says, we're going to ask the shareholders to put more money in the company, because we're not ready to, you know, support it any longer unless they put their money on the line, or we're going to ask them to sell the company. So none of the shareholders wanted to put any money in the company. They never had, and they never planned on it, and they didn't have any money. So the only other choice was to sell it. So when I found that out, I told the undertakers, I said, look, I'd like to buy the company. I didn't know how I was going to pull that off, but what happened is they tried to sell the company to a variety of different competitors who had deep pockets and everything. But the problem with that was that there wasn't enough time really left for any competitor to do their due diligence on the company. Do you guys know what due diligence is? You know, really look at everything in the company to make sure that everything was legitimate. And this takes time. You know, if you're dealing with a company that's $10 million or whatever, it takes time to do all this work, you know, months and months and months. So the offer that I had made was not as rich as the ones that the competitors had made, but the difference between my offer and their offer was that there was no conditions. I knew the company inside out. I didn't need to do a due diligence process, go through a due diligence process. So in the final analysis, and, you know, there were a lot of things that took place you know, throughout that whole period of time, which I won't get into right now, but we were able to convince one shareholder in one of the families to go to everybody, all the shareholders, and convince the majority of them that that was probably the sensible thing to do under the circumstances. And in the final analysis, they accepted my offer, and my offer was about 1/3 of what the competitors' offers were, but it was, you know, the money was basically ready to go, and we were ready to do the deal immediately. Now, you might ask yourselves, you know, how did I pull the deal off? Okay, well, it's an interesting story in itself, because in 1996, I didn't have a pot to piss in. And, you know, like most people, I was just making ends meet and struggling, and, you know, didn't have any money. So the question became, how do I raise enough money to pull off a deal, $1 million deal, essentially, to buy this company? And the answer is that I went to all of my network of friends, family, and business acquaintances who were 10 times, some of them were 10 times smarter than me in their own, you know, areas of knowledge, like accounting and finance and so on and so forth. And I asked them to help me, as they always said they would. And they all came to my rescue. I had a plan. I had put together a business plan. Business plans are very critical for starting or acquiring any kind of business, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I had a plan. I had built a very solid business plan while I was, you know, working in my basement trying to figure out how I was going to take these guys out. So when I finally pulled it off, my business plan was ready to go. And not only did I present that to the people that were willing to help me, banks, accountants, family members, and so on, but make a long story short, I was able to put the money together. I scraped up $25,000 by, you know, credit card and some money in the bank and stuff like that, borrowed some money from my dad. But, you know, even at that, that was like a drop in the bucket compared to what was required to buy the company. And the final analysis, it required a major investment on the part of the banks and the Fonds de Solidarité. I don't know if that rings a bell. It's a very big organization here in Quebec, a venture capital fund. And with the help of all these people, I was able to put together a financing plan with the banks and the Fonds de Solidarité and buy the company. And that was in 1996. The day I bought the company, we closed the books, and the company lost $1 million that year on sales of maybe, I don't know, $6 million, I think, or something like that. And the next year, a year later, after I acquired the company, we made $1 million profit, which means a $2 million turnaround in 1 year. And for the next 9 years after that, it just kept getting better for a variety of reasons. We were, growing. We were building a solid sales force throughout the United States in particular. We were, making a lot of other things happen that reinforced the infrastructure of the company. And there were a lot of other things that were going in our favor. The dollar was at 68 cents, for quite a while, which was very favorable and put us in a very competitive position in the U.S. vis-a-vis our competitors. We did go through a recession, though, I know, during that 9-year period, but for some reason I don't remember it. I remember the last one. I don't know if you guys remember the last recession, but that's when the shit hit the fan, if I can put it mildly. Do you guys remember the last recession by any chance?
Like 90, 93-ish?
No, the last one.
2008.
Yeah. Do you guys remember the recession and the repercussions of after 2008? I mean, it basically reset the clock. And we're only coming out of it. We're still trying to come out of it now. In Canada, we're struggling to get out of it. The U.S. is doing a much better job at recovering, but we're still feeling the after effects of a recession that began in 2008. So I can't help but not forget it. But that one in the 90s, I don't remember for some reason. I was oblivious to it. Anyway, 9 years later, I was approached by a publicly traded company, and they asked me, they didn't ask me, they said they wanted to buy my company. And I said, well, it's not for sale, I'm still having fun and all this and that. It wasn't necessarily true, but I didn't want to show my weakness. But the company was doing very, very well. It was at its top, it was at its peak in terms of sales and profitability, and everything was perfect. I mean, perfect for the most part financially, but a year prior to selling the company, there was this little mini tornado that went through Sherbrooke and ripped the entire roof off the building of our factory. 25,000 square foot roof just came up, and in 2 seconds, the whole thing landed on the front lawn. And I'll never forget that horror story, because that created total havoc in the company for a year, just trying to keep it all together, because all the equipment was damaged. There was rain, water damage to the equipment, and so on and so forth, and we couldn't deliver on time, and customers were threatening to go to the competition and all this and that. So it was a crazy year, and I don't know how the hell I pulled it off, but I managed to keep it all together. I lost a few key people and made some mistakes with the insurance company and so on and so forth, but for the most part, I kept it all together so that when these guys showed up in my door and said, we want to buy your company, from their perspective, it looked perfect. I had a brand new roof on the building when they showed up. Everything was perfect. And I said, well, it's not for sale, which made them even more eager. And they said, well, everything's for sale at the right price. And I said, well, you got a point there, so what's the right price? They made me an offer that I couldn't resist. And to this day, I look at it and I go, wow, I was blessed. I mean, in so many ways, because not only did I get top dollar for the company, but I sold it 1 year before, or about a year and a half before the recession of 2008 hit us. And when that hit, and nobody knew it was coming, even though they blamed me for it, I didn't know it was coming. Who knew it? Nobody knew it was coming. The company got hit really hard, for not only because of the recession, but the dollar also went from 68 cents to par over a year or so. So they had these two, it was like a double whammy hit them at the same time. And a year after they bought it, they came back to me and they said, look, there's still 15% owed to you. And, for various reasons, like company's not making any money anymore, and we got to reinforce the building because the roof is too heavy, and all kinds of issues like that. They refused to pay me that last 15% balance of payment that was in escrow. And so we got into a bit of a fight over that, but in a final analysis, I kind of settled with them for about half of that 15%, which was, really in the grand scheme of things, not a big deal, because I got out just in time, and I had done everything right, I thought, from my perspective. So I retired at the age of 49 and moved the family to Stowe, Vermont, one of my dream places on this planet, and I wanted to go and live there. So we went down there. We bought this big property down there and overlooking the mountain, and the whole plan was to live happily ever after. Well, I got into a bit of a war with these guys, for a variety of reasons, which took a year to settle. Took a lot of energy from me to try to deal with. In the meantime, just prior to that, I bought a company down in Massachusetts, which I was also in the final stages of resolving that issue too, because I bought this company and 2 years later I moved all the equipment to Sherbrooke and shut that thing down. That was a great thing. It was like a blessing in disguise. But there was a lot going on in those years is what I'm trying to say. But came out of it in good shape and put the money in the bank, moved the family to Stowe, kept the house here in North Hatley. But the plan was to live there happily ever after. Only problem was I wasn't able to get a green card for my girlfriend and my daughter, who we had just adopted a year earlier, and I had one, but I couldn't get one for them. It's very complicated to get a green card. So we couldn't send her to school there, and my girlfriend couldn't work down there. And I didn't want to work. But, so anyway, they, basically said, look, we got to send her to school, and my girlfriend wanted to go back to work and, just do something with her life, which made perfect sense to me. By the 4th year, after we moved down there, it became pretty clear to me that I needed to get back to work too, because I was bored out of my mind. I had all this energy and knowledge and vitality, and I was just ready to do something with it. So we all agreed that that was the best choice. We ended up keeping the house down there, so we go down there every weekend. But we moved back here, and my daughter goes to school in Sherbrooke, and my girlfriend's working. And I bought a new company 4 years ago, which is a great story in itself, a true blessing in itself, I must say. Just to tell you how that happened is when I made the decision to buy a new company, I put a list together of about 100 names of people that I knew, that I'd worked with, or had acquaintances with, or helped me along the way. And my plan was to reach out to all of them and just let them know I was looking for a new business and see if anybody knew of a business for sale. And I sent out 25 emails the first day. And I only sent 25 emails out in the final analysis because I got 25 meetings out of 25 emails with 25 people over a course of a week. And what came of that were a number of opportunities. I kicked some tires for a while. I looked at some companies that I was thinking I was interested in buying. But there was this one company where I got together with a guy thanks to a friend of mine, and after the meeting, I got to the meeting and he says, well, I'm not for sale. And I was like, what am I doing here then? And the guy calls me back, I don't know, about 3-4 weeks later, and he says, I've rethought it, and he says, I might be interested in selling the business because the timing's good. And the timing was good because he was my age, he had founded this company in Sherbrooke, and he was about to get married for the first time, and his wife was about to have twins. And in his mind, he thought, that gives me enough time to have a buyer do the due diligence and sell the company just about the time where my wife's going to have her kids. So him and I embarked on a series of negotiations. Very difficult guy to work with, but fortunately I have a lot of patience, and I was able to work with this guy and come to a deal. It was the best deal I ever made in my life. And again, I pulled it off by using the same approach as I did the first time around, but this time I had more people to work with. I had a track record. I had a business plan. I had banks that were chasing me to give me loans, and I had the Fonds de Solidarité, who had got one heck of a return of investment on their investment in my former company, so they wanted to do business with me too. So all the cylinders were clicking at that point. So I bought this company here in Sherbrooke. It's a 27-year-old company, and we manufacture electric vehicles, not for the road, but for industry. These are vehicles that look like golf carts, but they're built like tanks, and they use them in factories. Motrec is the name of the company. And these vehicles, what they do is they pull trailers around the factory with parts, feed assembly lines, move people around. And what's happened over the last few years, I've owned the company now, it'll be 4 years in May. We've almost quadrupled the sales in 4 years. The profitability is like 8 times what it was when I bought it, and it was doing well when I bought it, so you can imagine. I've reinforced the team. I brought in some new people I've worked with in the past. I acquired a great team. Everybody that was working there at the time are still working there. They love their company. They have a passion for what they do. It's just an incredible group of people, and really what it's all about is it's all about people at the end of the day. We got a great product, but without those people, there would be no product. So right now we're riding this big wave of success for a variety of reasons. We got a great product, we got a great team, we got a 27-year track record. But the U.S. economy, as I mentioned before, is booming right now compared to 2 years ago or 4 years ago. And in particular, the automobile industry is booming. What happened during the recession is they shut all these factories down and they resized and so on and so forth. But when the country came out of the recession, everybody wanted to buy a car. And so they started, firing up these factories, the ones that were still existing, and now they can't keep up with the demand. Every single automobile manufacturer in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and even abroad, do not have enough capacity right now to deliver the cars that are being ordered right now. I'll give you an example. Down at Ford in Detroit, where they manufacture the F-150 truck, it's a 5 million square foot building. I was in there last year. You walk in there, there's nobody working there. And you're going like, what's going on? They're making 1,200 trucks a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they can't keep up. They've automated the whole factory is what they've done. They've taken the lead. During the recession, they all sat back and they said, when this economy finally kicks in again, we better be prepared to be lean and automate it like our competitors in Europe, in Germany in particular. And so that's what they did. They took that time to automate. And so you walk in there now and there's nobody working there. At least it looked that way. I'm sure there's thousands of people working there, but you don't see them. It's such a huge factory. But what you do see in that factory is 150 Motrec vehicles buzzing around this place. And they're all feeding the assembly line with parts. It was just a thing of beauty to walk in there and see that. It was so breathtaking, and I felt so proud to see our vehicles, really doing the job down there. So I visited probably 10 automobile factories in Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. in the last couple of years, and it's the same story everywhere. They're just filled with our vehicles, and we're delivering them truckloads at a time every day, and we can't keep up with the demand. So how long is it going to last? I don't know. But you know how it is, everything's cyclical. There will be another recession. They've been talking about it for a year now, 2 years now. It hasn't hit. Well, it's hit here in this country. We're struggling. I don't know if you guys know, but this country, unfortunately, is struggling, particularly the manufacturing sector. And now that oil prices are so low, we're not bringing in that revenue that we once had or once counted on, that kind of artificially made this country look like it was doing well economically. So that's not there anymore. So we're not doing that great. I don't want to be a pessimist, but the U.S., on the other hand, is doing much better than we are. We were doing better than they were during the recession, but now things have reversed. So we got a lot of work to do here. I think the advantage of the lower oil prices is that the government is now focused on the manufacturing sector and saying, ooh, we better help these guys because we can't help the oil industry right now because it's all dictated by oil pricing. But we can help the manufacturing industry, and we probably should have helped them 5 years ago because we've probably lost half our manufacturing base in the last 10 years as a result of them closing their eyes and forgetting about us while they focused on the oil patch. Anyway, that's my take on it. So that's kind of where I'm at these days, and I just want to end this because I've got a fly here. I do really. You know, I've experienced a lot. I don't want to make it sound all rosy because, you know, I have gone through a number of failures and fuck-ups in my time, and none of them were rosy. I mean, they were all difficult situations that really put a tremendous strain on me and my family, and I never want to forget about those. Those are my reference points. I don't want to make those kind of mistakes again. I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I think any entrepreneur is going to make mistakes, and you've got to accept that fact right out of the gate. And if you do, and you're ready to do that, then you will succeed because you're prepared for the worst, but you're also prepared for the best too. So I won't, you know, get into all the different scenarios that I experienced that fall under that umbrella, but there were a lot of them, you know, environmental issues, court challenges, you name it. There were just so many issues that I had to deal with, but it just gave me that confidence and knowledge to be able to use it to my advantage in another opportunity. And I'm trying to do that now in my new business. Everything is going just perfectly, and the goal is to keep it that way. So I just want to end by giving you guys just a few pieces of advice, if I may. Take it for whatever it's worth. It's just the way I see it. First of all, harness and project your passion and confidence every day. Do what you enjoy that makes you tick, and take yourself seriously. It's all about the people, as I mentioned earlier. Build an entourage of people around you, people that know 10 times more than you do, and don't be afraid to ask them for your help, because if they believe in you, they will help you. Keep focused and be disciplined and determined in what you do. Never give up. Be open-minded and listen to people attentively. I do that. I mean, to this very day, I'm always listening. You know, I may ask questions just to prompt people to talk, but I'm listening to what they have to say. Always maintain your integrity. Trust your instincts. I'm doing that more and more these days. Never burn a bridge with anybody. Try to avoid creating enemies wherever you go. Be humble. Never take your success for granted. I feel like I've achieved a certain amount of success, but I never attribute that to me. I basically say I'm blessed, I'm fortunate, and I am. And there's a lot of people that work 10 times harder than I do, and they're not as fortunate or as blessed as I am. So, you know, I don't take it for granted. Always help people that aren't as fortunate as you, and strive to create a happy environment, you know, where you work, because if people are happy, they're productive. Draw out the strengths in people and lead the way. You got to lead the way if you're the entrepreneur. And last but not least, work hard. And on that note, just leave you with a quotation that I really like, that I've used for years, and it's from the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, and he said, "I'm a hard believer in luck. The harder I work, the more I get it." So think about that. So that's the story in a nutshell. And thank you for listening, and I hope you all got a little bit of something out of that.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you.